afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Fearless Readers virtual author talk with the Pritzker Military Museum and Library. My name is Rosie Waniak, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the PMML. Today, we're going to be reading a book called 21 Steps, Guarding the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is a memorial in Arlington National Cemetery that honors the fallen soldiers who, for one reason or another, could not be identified and returned to their families. And since 1937, it has been guarded 24/7 by some of the most dedicated and disciplined soldiers the Army has to offer. Joining us to read and talk about this book is the author, Jeff Gottesfeld. Jeff writes for Page, Stage, and Screen. He has won awards from the American Library Association, the Association of Jewish Libraries, the Writers Guild of America, the National Council for the Social Studies, and the American Alliance for Theater and Education. His current focus is picture book texts for children. Aside from 21 Steps, his other award-winning picture books are The Tree in the Courtyard, illustrated by Peter McCarty, No Steps Behind, illustrated by Sheila Watanto, The Christmas Mitzvah, illustrated by Michelle Agatha, and Food for Hope, also illustrated by Michelle Agatha. Being illustrated now are two additional Candlewick picture book titles about American military life, including We All Serve, about military brats, and Honor Flight, about that amazing program for our aging veterans. Born in Manhattan and raised in Teaneck, New Jersey, Jeff currently lives in Los Angeles. Now, please welcome our author, Jeff Gottesfeld.
Thanks, Rosie. It's great to be with you virtually from Los Angeles and across the country. Hi, everybody. When people ask me about 21 Steps and how I came to write it, I always blush and flush a little bit because I consider myself a very imperfect messenger for this story. I was not in the military. I have three big strapping brothers. None of them served. My parents didn't serve, and my grandparents didn't serve. So I am an unlikely candidate for this. But as my life progressed, I found myself coming to understand that the United States military is, in my opinion, the greatest fighting force for good on the planet, and probably in the history of the planet. So with that in mind, starting, I'm going to guess in the early 1990s, I started going to national cemeteries wherever I happened to be living. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee in the 90s, so I went to the big national cemetery there. And when I lived in Salt Lake City, there's a small cemetery there, and I would go there on Memorial Day. And here in Los Angeles, we have a big national cemetery near the UCLA campus. So I was there in 2016 with my de facto wife and younger stepdaughter. And we are walking amongst the headstones of a crowded cemetery that day. And I saw a tombstone that said on it, unknown. Okay, I had no idea that there were unknown soldiers buried in that cemetery. And we walked a little further, and there was another one that said unknown, just an ordinary headstone. And at the second one, I stopped and thought back to when I was in my teens and had gone on a trip to Arlington National Cemetery, just outside DC, and to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I realized, I'm supposed to be an educated person here. I knew nothing about the tomb. I didn't know when it was built. I didn't know which unknown soldier was buried there or how many. I certainly didn't know anything about the tomb guards, who I remember in their intense precision were guarding it every hour of the day, as I knew. So by the time I left the cemetery that day, 2 hours later, I was determined to try to tell this story as a picture book for kids. So I had that scary moment that all writers have, which is you go home and you're hoping against hope that nobody else has done that story. And I was lucky, nobody did. So I got to work, and let me read to you what I did. So the title is 21 Steps, Guarding the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It's from Candlewick Books, and the illustrator is a fellow from Maine named Matt Tavares. We'll talk a little more about him soon. So I start this book with a poem that I did not write. It's called The Sentinel's Creed, and it was handwritten on a sheet of paper outside the tomb guard quarters, underneath the tomb of the unknown soldier, in 1971, and it was signed only with the name Simon. So we have no idea whether the person who wrote this, Simon's a first name, a last name, just like the unknown soldier. The author is unknown. My dedication to this sacred duty is total and wholehearted. In the responsibility bestowed on me, never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is he who commands the respect I protect. His bravery that made us so proud. Surrounded by well-meaning crowds by day, alone in the thoughtful peace of night, this soldier will in honored glory rest under my eternal vigilance. 21 steps. I am an unknown. I am one of many. We fell for the last time in the Argonne forest, at Somme, Belleau Wood, face down in trenches, face up on hillsides, we fell 1,000 ways. In life, we were our mother's sons. In death, we are faded photos on the mantle, empty chairs at Thanksgiving, prayers in the dark before dawn. We are known but to God. After the war, to end all wars, most of America's fallen came home. Their families could place flowers on their graves and pebbles on their headstones. But combat's vile fury left others nameless and faceless. There was no way for loved ones to claim us, no place for our nation to honor our sacrifice. In 1921, one unknown returned to stand for all. I was transported by the Navy to Washington and lay in state in the Capitol, where an army of mourners filed past my casket. Many were families whose sons died, nameless and faceless. As they knelt, prayed, and anointed my flag with tears, I felt their stories. The stories of a Boston kid who swung for the fences, a Texas boy who broke horses, a Choctaw Nation farmhand, a Nevada miner. In that moment, I became theirs. On the 11th day of the 11th month, at the 11th hour, a team of horses bore me to Arlington. Thousands packed the amphitheater. There were speeches, taps, and a 21-gun salute when I was laid to rest. As the day lengthened, those for whom I died lingered and drifted on the roiled waters of loss. I gave them peace. People, though, forget easily. My tomb stands on a hill crest. It did not take long for visitors to come for the view and not the meaning. Some brought picnics, feasting gaily above my bones. Volunteers put a stop to that desecration. But as the plaza emptied in the gloaming, I lay alone with my war. Mustard gas and barbed wire, bayonet charges, and names unanswered at roll call. Late one half-moon night, I heard footsteps. The sharp click of heels. Silence. Another click. More silence. 21 footsteps. Click. 21 seconds of silence. Click. 21 seconds of silence. 21 more steps. With each step, my war was over. From that moment, I have never been alone again. No matter the hour or the weather, a sentinel guards the plaza. It is the most difficult post to earn in the Army. Many fail for each one chosen. Those granted the privilege may walk the mat for 2 years. Everything they do honors the unknown fallen. They press their creases sharp as a razor, rehem their trousers so they lie just right, singe loose threads from their jacket's top stitching, space their medals down to 1/64th of an inch, practice keeping their forearms at 90 degrees, recount pages of cemetery history, set their hat brims 2 fingers above their eyes, dampen their gloves to better grip their rifles, march so their heads stay ever level, add metal to their heels for the sharpest click, polish their spits for hours every day. The tomb guards are men and women of every race, religion, and creed. Before joining the Army, they were students, mechanics, and supermarket baggers. They have names, families, and stories. Once on the mat, they are only Americans. Their standard is perfection. My guards were present when more unknowns came home. One from World War II and one from Korea. Then, years later, one from Vietnam. They lay in state in the capital as I did, where an army of mourners filed past the caskets. Many were families whose sons died, nameless and faceless. Mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers knelt, prayed, and anointed the flags with tears. Their stories were different and the same. In time, through the wonder of science, the Vietnam unknown was named and returned to his family. His crypt is now empty. We who remain are never alone. our guards keep faith. There is admiration in their pants crease, duty in their hems, focus in their top stitching, gratitude between the medals, reverence in the angle of their rifles, discipline in their learning, respect in their hat brims, fidelity in their gloves, appreciation in their step, devotion in their heel clicks, and love in their gleaming spits. I am an unknown. I am one of many. From Bunker Hill to Heartbreak Ridge, we gave all we had for our country and freedom. The tomb guards give all they have for us. In glorious sunshine, on bluebird days, the plaza shimmers with life. Crowds gather. Aging veterans, tourists, and school groups line the marble steps. They marvel at our sentinels. Then they gaze past the mat to the tomb and imagine our stories. In that moment, we become theirs. In wretched night, when stinging sleep makes daybreak a distant dream, the plaza is desolate. Our guards need no audience in their quest for perfection. As they walk the mat, they listen for our voices on the howling wind. In snow, in rain, on days the birds don't dare to sing, 21, 21, 21. By day, by night, before many, few, or none, 21, 21, 21. Guard our perfect rest. Give us now your very best. 21, 21, 21, 21. The end.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for reading this beautiful book for us. I do have one question already from an audience member. Jeff, what kind of research did you have to do to make sure that the facts were correct for this book?
It's a great question. Some books are easier to do than others in terms of their research. Mine are never easy because I never write from my own experience. So I'm always out there. The good news is there's a lot of written material about Arlington, including some excellent books. There's a very good one from National Geographic Society, for example. There are any number of accounts written by tomb guards past and present about their time there. There's a lot of film. There's a lot of video. There's an excellent documentary called The Unknowns, which I drove 5.5 hours to a screening to see. And then once I had my knowledge in place where I felt that I would be conversant and not embarrass myself, I started talking to tomb guards, past and present, and to the Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is the organization of tomb guards, past and present. But that wasn't the end of it, because the book had to be written. So then every draft went past tomb guards, and all of Matt's art went past tomb guards and went through people at the Army and the Navy. This book is as close to perfect as anything that I've ever written, and probably that Matt's ever illustrated.
And speaking of Matt, these illustrations are beautiful. And again, they were created by Matt Tavares. Can you tell us anything about the process of having these illustrations done for the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a great moment when Candlewick contacted me and said they wanted Matt Tavares to do this book, because I knew his art. And it had exactly the right feel for this project. So I was delighted. Matt did almost as much research as I did. He went to Washington. He lives in Maine. He went to Washington twice, once in summer and once in winter, and went into the tomb guard quarters and drew. I got to see his sketches, which were terrific, and then his finished art. And then we started making some small adjustments to that art based on what tomb guards came back to us and said. I mean, for example, there's a piece of art in the book where there's a tomb guard and they wear something called a buck strap over their shoulder, which goes back to Civil War. And Matt had drawn the buck strap a little too tight for the tomb guards who looked at it. So he redid it and made it perfect. There were some adjustments that he made in there's a big spread of Arlington from a distance. He made some small adjustments there. He was committed to this book. His standard was perfection. It's easy to get inspired by the tomb guards when it comes to that. So it was the perfect meld of art to my words.
You have mentioned a couple times now that you and Matt have spoken to and conversed with tomb guards to inform this book. But interestingly, it's not written from a guard's perspective. So can you tell us why you chose to write this book from the perspective of an unknown soldier?
Yeah, because the first time I tried to write it third person, and it wasn't very good. No, I'm just being serious. I went home, was all excited, did my research, had everything in a row, and I started to write. And my idea was, okay, I'm going to tell the story of a boy who's 9, who goes to Washington, D.C. with his parents on a springtime trip. And they're having a great time. He goes to the top of the Washington Monument. He goes to the White House. He flies kites on the National Mall. It's great. And then the last day, his parents wake him up. It's pouring rain outside. And they say, we're going to Arlington. And the kid is like, no, I don't want to go to a graveyard. And they take him anyway. They go to the tomb. He meets a tomb guard there. Here's the story. And I wrote it that way. It was okay. I mean, it might even have been good, but it wasn't good enough. And I talked with my book agent, who's very, very smart and has been my agent for a very long time. And she's like, you wrote this book, The Tree in the Courtyard, and it's from the point of view of a tree. Do you think maybe you can change the point of view here and do it from the point of view of the tomb? And I was like, no, I can't do that. But maybe this will work if I do it from the point of view of the first unknown, and we'll never know who it is. And once I had that point of view, I had the book.
That's fantastic. It definitely does have more impact from the perspective of the unknown soldier.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the beauty part of first person, right? I mean, because when something is in first person, you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's telling the story, except the shoes of the person telling the story here, it could be any of us, and that's the whole point there, that we have no idea whether the unknown soldier is enlisted or an officer. We don't know if they were Black, white, Asian, Latino. We don't know if they were Jewish or Gentile. We know absolutely nothing, which means that the unknown soldier belongs to every single person.
Great. We have another question from our audience here. So our audience member says, your book is a perfect snapshot in time. Are you planning any future updates or any future books about the unknown soldier of the tomb?
It's a good question. I tried to make this book timeless, and I think it is in that way. I mean, the dress may change of spectators, the specifics of what the tomb guards may wear is different, but I don't know how many people in the audience here have been to Arlington, but it is both a snapshot in time when you go there. It's unforgettable at that moment, and yet it looks the same every time you go. The weather changes, of course, but that view of you're looking at the mat, there's the guard, you look through the guard at the tomb, you imagine the stories, you look beyond it, you see the headstones, you look beyond that, there's Washington, D.C. God willing, it's going to look like that for another 200 years.
Thank you. Now, more generally, what was your favorite part of writing the book? What did you enjoy the most about creating this?
Oh, it was the moment when I knew that first person was going to work. It was actually that first. It was the first line. I am an unknown. Yeah, no, but for me, my favorite part was my ability to communicate in this book the way actions of tomb guards connect to values of tomb guards and vice versa. I mean, you don't necessarily think about discipline in the recounting of history, but those tomb guards, when I say they recount history, it's not like they recount a page of bullet points. They have to, one of their first tests is they have to memorize 20 single-space pages of history about Arlington, and they have to recite it, including the punctuation, commas, periods, whatever, and you're allowed, I think, a few mistakes. And if you make more than a few mistakes, you don't go on in this. So for me, the idea where I can do a book that's about America, about ordinary Americans, and also about values like discipline and reverence and fidelity. I mean, these are the values that I hold dear in my life. It was just a tremendous gift.
Wonderful. Now, on the flip side of that question, what was the most difficult part of writing the book?
A great question. There's no room in a picture book. You have no room. You've got maybe 700 words to tell a long and complicated story. I mean, for example, like I would have loved in the book to explain why tomb guards take 20, why is it 21 steps? Why is it a 21 gun salute? Where did that come from? Well, the answer is it goes back to the Middle Ages when sailing ships were warships would come into a port, and if they were coming in peace, they would fire 7 cannon shots out to sea, and then the shore battery would shoot back 21 blanks, and everything was cool. It was peaceful, and 21 became a number associated with honor. But there's no room to do that in this text, so it's like, okay, you can't do everything, and people need to hear me come and speak about it. It's having no room and telling the whole story.
Well, I'm very glad we have you here to share that, because that was my next question. Why the 21 steps?
Right. And you just assume it. It's a 21 gun salute. Now, Rosie, is that the real reason that it came about? I don't know. There are accounts of that being the rationale behind it, but it's sort of like a magical number associated with honor.
Fantastic. Well, if we don't have any other questions from our audience, I have one closing question for you, Jeff.
Please.
I always like to end on this question. So what is the number one takeaway that you want your readers to get from this book?
We live in an age where we are more concerned and more attention is being paid to identity on an individual level, maybe than ever in American history. And it's important to know who you are and where you came from. But actually, the Tomb of the Unknown is about self-effacement and the obliteration of identity and the sacrifice of identity for something that's larger. On the map, those tomb guards look the same. You are not able to identify one from the other. They want to be standardized that way, so that attention is not paid to them, but to the tomb and the interred behind them. It's a rare way to look at the world these days, but it's pretty important too.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today for this special program. And I hope you all had fun and learned something new. And thank you, Jeff, for joining us to read and talk about your fantastic book. To learn more about family programs at the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, please visit us online at pritzkermilitary.org/family-programs. There you can find all of our upcoming family programs and sign up for our newsletter. Thank you, and we hope to see you again soon.